Okay, this is the vlog for September 8th, 2018. Um, Today was interesting. So I went down, I had gone down to Uncle's Games in Redmond last weekend, um, while the house was still sort of fumy. Boy, it's been a whole week, hasn't it? And while I was there, I actually worked on my laptop doing a bunch of notes for the game, rolling a lot of dice, probably looking like just an average D&D guy. Um, but I had intended to purchase something so that I wasn't just sitting there using their time and probably bewildering some of the managers as to what exactly I was doing because I didn't have a group of players with me. So I went back to buy a couple things, just, some random things that I felt like I needed. So imagine my surprise when I found out that today, September 8th, 2018, is the 40th anniversary of Uncle's Games. Originally, the store, I guess, was Uncle's Books and Games back in 1978. And eventually it split into two different companies. It was Uncle's Games and Auntie's Books. And I guess there's still two Auntie's Books somewhere in the state of Washington. I think one's in Spokane is what they told me. But they had a special promotion to celebrate the anniversary. It's a game store, so they had everybody that rang up at the counter roll two six-sided dice, two cubes, in a little dice cup right there on the counter. And then they had a chart that determined what kind of discount you got based on the roll. Everybody was guaranteed a 10% discount at base. And the better you did, the higher your discount got. I rolled a 10, which I thought, oh cool, that's pretty good. And I got 30% off my purchase. So not bad, which is how I am now owning Volod's Guide to Monsters. And I'm reading this and actually enjoying it quite a lot. I also got about $30 worth of miniatures, essentially for free. The whole price of the purchase was about $80, but I only paid 50 something. It was 87, and I only paid 50 something, probably like 55 or 54. So fantastic, excellent deal. And I'm still sort of tempted to go back down and try my luck again, but that's the gambler's fallacy, right? Even when you roll well, you assume that you can match that luck again, which I almost certainly wouldn't be able to. And knowing that I could get a 10% discount on some stuff, that's sort of tempting. But I honestly don't know what else I would get other than like Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which I've also been eyeing, but probably don't need nearly as badly. Well, I don't need any of this stuff, but so other than that, I've spent the day writing about Medusa, or rather Medusas, and let me go into that. Medusa is a specific character in Greek mythology. She is one of three sisters, collectively known as Gorgons, who were cursed by the gods, I believe. In typical Greek god fashion, it's very, very unfair for the person being cursed. In Medusa's case, she was apparently raped in the temple of another god. And so she was raped in a temple by a god that was not of that temple. And so the god that was in control of the temple cursed her because she was the one at fault. I can hear feminists screaming in my ears about that one right now. Her sisters were also punished for standing in her defense, understandably, I think, given the circumstances. So Medusa, who was the youngest, Euryale, who was the middle child, and Sthno. I don't know if it's Sethno or Cessno. It's probably Cessno, given Greek, but I couldn't be sure about that. The three of them were cursed to have a hideous appearance, described variously as having bronze claws or tusks for teeth, like a boar, and in almost all accounts, having snakes for hair. And Medusa, at the very least, if not her sisters, could turn people to stone if they stared into her eyes. That's all really cool. Makes for an interesting story, at least. Medusa was not immortal, but her sisters were, because all three of them were actually technically either gods or demigods. They had been birthed by two beings of enormous power. So they had some spark of divinity in them. And Cessno and Uriel were, or however you pronounce them, my Greek is not great, could not be killed, but Medusa could, and eventually she was slain by the hero Perseus. And after being decapitated, a Pegasus leapt out of her head. She is sometimes depicted as having wings on the side of her head for this reason. But let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons for a second. A Medusa is just a typical Gorgon, or is at least, the way Gorgons are typically depicted. Snakes for hair, can turn people to stone with their gaze. Generally an attractive female, or sometimes an unattractive. They tend to have very exaggerated faces when they're about to turn someone to stone, but sometimes drawn with very pretty features, given that she was apparently beautiful enough that a god was bewitched with her and did unsundry things to her. In the Dynostria campaign setting, I have complicated things, which is, typical of me. So, the Gorgons in Dungeons and Dragons are normally not at all associated with the Gorgons of Greek mythology. Gorgons are usually iron-plated oxen, or bulls, that emit poisonous vapors from their mouths that can kill people who breathe too deeply or are fighting them. And I don't really know why those things are called Gorgons. It's possible that Gorgon meant something in a different language, and that was why they decided to name that kind of creature that thing. But Medusas, snake hair, Gorgons, metal ox with poison breath. In Dynostria, Gorgons are in fact the descendants of the three sisters. And I've created this interesting backstory for the three of them, but they're all different. Medusa is the one that has the snakes and is associated with serpents and has the petrification gaze. All of her descendants carry some aspect of that to some extent or another. You'll see some depictions of Medusa where her lower body isn't legs; it's just one big snake body. But Cessno and Uriel are where I decided to get really crazy. I wanted mean, nasty things to be associated with women of surprising beauty. So in Uriel's case, she's actually got like squid or octopus tentacles for hair. And her skin is a mix of vibrant pink purple and pallid white death-looking flesh. And each one of her little tentacles also hides a little eye that can open up and look around, making her look almost a little bit like a beholder. And although not all of her descendants have all of her features, she is herself, she sort of has like a Ursula from Little Mermaid lower body with tentacles, one long fluked tail with a number of tentacles around it, to be precise. And then Cessno definitely got the short end of the stick. Instead of snakes or tentacles, her hair is actually like spider legs. And she has extra eyes on the sides of her head and 4 extra legs and a long centipede body trailing back behind her. Her skin is sort of bronzish colored and hard like an exoskeleton, and she's the most sort of combat oriented, and so are her descendants. Her descendants are not necessarily exactly her children, although she calls them her children. They are just people who have partaken of the cursed blood that all three of them share, and that's why they have become these monstrous beings. But it's a very interesting story, and I don't want to reveal all the little cool details in this video because I'd much rather players eventually find this stuff out for themselves, and I'd much rather write about it in my prose. I've got sort of the plan for a campaign featuring Gorgons, or a campaign arc at the very least, maybe not an entire campaign, but quite a few adventures in a row. And then the prose will sort of run parallel to that story, revealing certain details, but not all of them, so somebody could play through the adventure and enjoy that, theoretically, and someone could also read the prose story and get a different perspective on all of the events. So, that's been my day. Snakes and tentacles and spiders and oh my. But this Volo's Guide is so much fun. I've been reading for the last half hour or so stuff about beholders, which is a monster that I've never had a party high enough level to have to deal with. So it never occurred to me that you could use them in all sorts of interesting ways, even if the party isn't necessarily intended to kill them. They can be a lot of fun to role play and set up situations and be sort of movers and shakers in a fantasy world. So who knows? Maybe a beholder will be in the future of my story or my adventures. Anyway, I've gone well over 10 minutes at this point, so I'll just say I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.